We're back. That's right. Down to the wire. Kevin Rogers with you. I was in for Joe Osborne last week on Chasing That Paper. That's why I was missing in action at night, but I am here. I am very happy to be back with you. Our third week of Down to the Wire and the first week of the NFL. It starts on Thursday night. You have the Bills and the Rams meeting up, the much anticipated matchup between the defending Super Bowl champions and the team that would like to get to the Super Bowl, the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk plenty of NFL. Frank Schwab of Yahoo Sports, he's going to join us momentarily. Also, Bruce Marshall in a little bit, talk some college football, look ahead to week 2. A lot of intriguing games from week 1, but also a lot of matchups week 2 to go over with Bruce. But before we do all of that, we have our Major League Baseball side of the day we'll begin with. And I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Rays. This line has dropped. They're up to 160 this morning, now down to 135. And Drew Rasmussen, who was slated to start, he got scratched. His wife's going to have a baby, so he's now out. But the Rays, though, beat the Red Sox last night. Rich Hill actually has pitched very well against Tampa Bay this year. He's not allowed a run in 2 starts against them. But Rich Hill, though, has not been great as an underdog. 0-5 Boston this year as a dog, a plus 120 or more when he takes the mound. So after a couple good starts against Tampa Bay, you see him as a dog. I'm going to fade that, go with Tampa Bay, take the Rays to pull out another win. So that's our side of the day. Our total of the day will come up in just a little bit. So with that being said, let's now transition to the NFL. We're 2 days away from the start of the season. And let's bring on Frank Schwab. He covers NFL betting for Yahoo Sports. He covered the NFL for a long time. He then went over to the betting realm, and he's with us now. Frank, thank you so much for joining us. What's the excitement level for you for the NFL starting another new season?
I mean, this is as excited as I've been for an NFL season in a while because, as I was doing the previews over the summer, you realize every one of these teams really had a seismic change, whether it was adding a quarterback or adding a Devontae Adams or new coach or whatever. Every team has some interesting storyline going into the season. So I'm fired up. I think it's going to be unpredictable season, fun season, and a really good season. It's just there's so many different angles to it.
So, Frank, week 1, what is the most intriguing betting storyline? Not the most intriguing game, but the most intriguing betting storyline to you this week?
Easily all the home underdogs. I mean, I don't think I haven't added them up from previous years. I can't lie to you, but I believe there's still 10 on the board, 10 home underdogs this week. And we know how week 1 goes. There's always some surprising results. I remember a couple of years ago, Jacksonville beats Indianapolis week 1 when Phillip Rivers was there, and everybody got off the scent of, everybody thought Jacksonville Jaguars were good for a minute. They'd end up going like 2-14 or whatever. Stuff like that happens week 1 all the time. So I really do think, even though I like a couple of road favorites, I kind of think if you bet all the home underdogs blind, you do pretty well week 1 because we're going to see some things that we just didn't expect. And having all these home dogs out there is just kind of crazy to me.
You had last year, Frank, 11 teams covered that were underdogs in week 1. I got to believe that's not going to happen again, but I'm going to tee this one up to you, okay? I'm going to give you 3 games. You got to give me 1. Kansas City at Arizona, Green Bay at Minnesota, Tampa Bay at Dallas, 3 elite teams, Chiefs, Packers, Buccaneers. Which one loses this week as a road favorite?
I mean, can I pick 2? Because I'm going against the Buccaneers and the Vikings. I'm going against the Buccaneers and the Packers. The Vikings are probably my favorite play week 1, just because I think the element of surprise is there. We don't know what Kevin O'Connell is going to do. He showed nothing in the preseason. None of the starters played. He's playing vanilla stuff. I think there's that element of surprise. I really respect LaFleur as a coach. I think he's a heck of a football coach. But when you're going in totally blind week 1, and the Packers always struggle in Minnesota, no matter what, even in their greatest years, the Brett Favre years, they go to the Metrodome and lose. The Rodgers has had trouble there. So it's already a tough matchup. And then I think the Packers are going to be trying to feel things out for the first few weeks without Devontae Adams, figure out what their offense is going to be, how Aaron Jones is going to be this multi-versatile weapon. So I really think the Packers on upset, not huge upset, but on upset alert week 1. And I like the Cowboys too. A little less is a Tyron Smith injury, but there's just such weird vibes coming out of the Buccaneers with the Ryan Jensen injury. Chris Godwin, we don't know if Chris Godwin's going to be available week 1. We don't know Russell Gage's health situation. We don't really know what's going on with Tom Brady right now. So yes, the Cowboys and the Vikings, 2 of my favorite plays in week 1.
I want to stay, Frank, on that Bucs-Cowboys matchup for a second. And you mentioned all the things going on with Tampa Bay. So Tom Brady, he retires. He comes back. You have the coaching change. You go from Arians to Todd Bowles. You have the offensive line injuries, as you mentioned. Gronk retires. Brady goes away for a little bit in the preseason, then comes back. Forget about Dallas, but just in general, do you think this could be like I don't say like a Titanic type season for the Buccaneers, but if things go sideways early, you think Tom's going to check out?
I don't think anybody's checking out, and I still think they're going to win that division. But I will say, I feel a lot less confident about them than I did a month ago. And the Brady thing, look, I mean, maybe it's just narrative street. We're making too much of it, and I'm making too much of it. But you just wonder when he's gone for 40 days and then he comes back, and the whole everybody's saying, well, Brady can do what he wants. He's Tom Brady. I get that. I totally do. And if he had this worked out with the Bucs beforehand, he's one dude in the NFL who can go take an 11-day vacation during training camp, and I'm not going to criticize him for it. But it's so unusual. I've never heard of anything like it. I've never heard of a star player or any player really just leaving camp for 11 days. And at this point, you just wonder, does he regret a little bit coming back? His family situation, is that going on? You just don't know. And also just at some point, age has to catch up to this guy. He's 45 years old. In history of the NFL, there's been one guy to attempt a pass at 45 or older. It was George Blanda. He had a total of 116 yards after his 45th birthday. We're in absolutely uncharted waters here with Tom Brady. So I don't know that they're necessarily going to be some 5-win team or something like that. But could it go? Are they more vulnerable? And we think absolutely, positively, yes. And even if you really dig the Saints, taking them to pretty good odds to win a division, I don't think it's crazy because, yes, you could see things going kind of sideways for the Buccaneers this year.
Thursday night, Frank, you have the Bills and the Rams, and this one opened up. It's like a pick 'em, Buffalo -1. It's up to 2.5, and you don't normally see Super Bowl champions as an underdog in week one, much less a home underdog. Years ago, I mean, where you're based out of in Colorado, Denver beat Carolina in that week one game. Carolina missed the late field goal. Denver won that game outright. So the Rams, I'm not going to say there's no motivation. There's always motivation, but you got to feel the Bills would be a little more motivated after the way their season ended against Kansas City last year. What's your feel on this Bills-Ram game and the line move?
And I wonder if the Rams are getting a little bit of motivation from this too. A little bit of, hey, we're the champs here. Why are we underdogs? Why is everybody talking about the Bills for this game? So I've been waiting for that line to move to 3. I don't think it will. I think if you find a 3, you're pretty lucky because I don't think the books want to get that to the full field goal after opening it as a pick way early on in the offseason. As much has been bet on this game, it will be bet on this game. But even 2.5, I mean, it's just a lot of points for a team that's a really good Rams team. I don't think Stafford's elbow is an issue anymore. I think he's going to be fine, or they would have shut him down a while ago. Both teams pretty healthy. Why can't the Rams compete here? It's a big night for them, raising the banner. Yes, it's scary to go against the Bills right now because the Bills have this loaded roster. They should be the Super Bowl favorite. They do have the best team, but going all the way to LA on a night you raise the banner against the defending champs, if you can give me 3, I'll take it for sure. 2.5, I'll probably do it. 3 for sure, because I just think this Rams team is getting not enough respect right now in the betting market.
Frank, who do you have more faith in as a home dog, the Bears or the Jets this week?
Probably the Jets, because I do think their roster is a little more talented than last year. They could be feisty this year. And as much as it stinks to say about a second overall pick, I wonder if Joe Flacco's better for this offense than Zach Wilson right away. No, we don't know. Zach might start. He's kind of back working out. I think they're going to be safe with him. I think Joe Flacco's going to start. But the Ravens are dealing with their own issues. We don't know if Ronnie Stanley's going to play their great left tackle. We don't know who's playing running back for them. Gus is obviously out. J.K. Dobbins is still up in the air. So the Ravens are dealing with some things. I just have no faith in the Bears. I think the Bears might be the worst team in football. So I have a little more faith in the Jets in this game. Not sure I'm going to, not going to be exactly playing a money line on them, but if you're asking me to pick between those two, I think Jets. I think you could see the Ravens at least struggling out of the gate, trying to reestablish themselves on offense, figure out their identity without Marquise Brown, without some of their running backs, maybe without Ronnie Stanley. It seems like this season's kind of starting like last season did for them with all the injuries.
When you look at the board here, Frank, and we've been doing this for months, looking at week one, it's funny. You go over this for so many months, then every other week you're kind of going, you have 6 days to figure it out. In my mind, Raiders-Chargers the toughest game of all of them to pick. What do you think? Do you agree with that? Or what's the toughest game in your mind to handicap this week?
Raiders Chargers, I don't have that as much problem with it because I just think the Chargers are going to come out. And again, why am I falling for the Chargers again? Right? Like they do this every year. They have this great roster on paper, and they come out and have all these disappointing games and losses, and you're like, yeah, I should have known better than that. There's not really one game that stands out to me as well. I really don't know what to do with this. Like I really like the Jaguars. I think they're going to go in and beat Washington. One game that does really confused me a bit is the Giants Titans, because I don't like the Giants and I don't like the Titans. I definitely don't want to really lay 6 with the Titans, but you can see the Giants starting really slow this season. That's probably my one stay away game for sure, just because I'm lower on the Giants than everybody else. I think I got them 29th or 30th in my power rankings that came out today. I just don't think they're any good. I know that their win total for a while was about 7. I do not see them even coming close to that, but also don't like this Titans team. Now, Harold Landry out with the ACL. It seems like it's been one thing after another for the Titans this offseason. So that's probably the one game where I'm just like throwing up my hand. This is one I'm definitely not getting any action on.
Yeah, and also with that Giants game, you kind of feel like, oh, you want to be sharp and take the Giants, but they've been terrible in openers. So why would you want to trust them? So coming up Monday, of another interconference game, Broncos Seahawks here, Frank, and of course Russell Wilson's return to Seattle. The schedule makers wanted that Monday Night Football. This line has been jacked up almost to a touchdown, 6.5. Is it getting a little out of control here? Are we putting a little too much into Denver? Because Seattle, we know Geno Smith is starting. There's still some players in the Seahawks. There's still a more established coach in Pete Carroll. But you think this has gotten a little out of hand with this line?
Yeah, I think, if I took the Broncos really early in the offseason, I'm almost regretting it a little bit because a couple things have happened. One of them, and I'm based here in Denver, you alluded to that. People of Bronco land here are freaking out about no starters in the preseason. And Nathaniel Hackett just took the McVay approach and said, we're not seeing any of these guys until week 1. And I think that's the right approach. But we have seen teams start slow when that happens. It's worth the trade-off, and I get it totally. But could we see the Broncos start slow in week 1 because Russ hasn't played in a game with this offense? No, they haven't. None of their guys have played since the end of last season. I think they could start slow. And you know what? You hate saying things like this out loud, but Geno is not terrible. Go back and look at the games he had to play last year when Russ was hurt, and he was a competent NFL quarterback. I'm not saying he's great. I'm not saying he's going to carry this offense, but like you said, they still got some dudes. Rashad Penny's healthy right now, and he had that great end of last season. Metcalf and Lockett, 2 great receivers. They still have some guys. So, this line keeps going up and up because the perception of Seattle is just that they're absolutely positively terrible. And they might end up being bad this year. But for 1 week, week 1, for all the talk of like, oh, Russ wants to show up the Seahawks and all this, and I agree with that. He probably does want to play well against his former team. His former teammates want to play well against him too. And Pete Carroll he knows, what gets in Russell Wilson's head and how you can beat him. So yeah, I think if it gets to 7, you got to go Seattle at that point. It almost is a contrarian play because it seems like everybody in the world's on the Broncos.
Now, Frank, before we let you go, on Yahoo, you had a couple of quarterback yardage season totals, and you're not a big fan of going over, so you went under on a few quarterbacks. First, we'll start with Jameis Winston, coming off the ACL tear last year. We'll see what he does this year, starting against Atlanta in week 1. But you don't have a lot of faith in Jameis to go over his yardage total?
I don't. And I think Jameis could have a fine season. But what we saw early last year, I think is going to be the blueprint for them again, where they don't want him to throw the ball that often. They want him to avoid mistakes. And, he had a good start to last season because of all the touchdowns, but that was not volume based. That was pretty unsustainable, his touchdown rate. So when you go back and look at the volume and how much he was passing, he's not going to become a 35 time a game passer. They want to keep him in the 20s. And I think it's going to be hard for him to go over. And also there's the injury risk. Like, he's coming off the torn ACL. And I know he's going to be on the field, but he's already dealt with that foot injury. And you just wonder, one thing sometimes leads to another. So I think there's a heightened injury risk with Jameis. And if he misses any games, you're cashing that under ticket pretty easily. So, yeah, I think the Saints are going to be good. I think Jameis is going to have a good, solid season, but I don't see him going over that passing yardage total.
All right, the second one we'll look at, Mac Jones with the Patriots, who are getting zero respect going into this week against the Dolphins and with everything that's happened in the offseason. But you also think Mac's finishing under?
Yeah, in another case where I kind of like Mac Jones as a player. I think he's been disrespected. He was the best rookie quarterback last year by a mile. Why can't he just be a good player? But this offense looks like a mess right now, and that's just part of it. Even if this offense is clicking, this is a Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson offense. This is not a Mac Jones offense. So again, is the volume going to be there? And when you're cutting it so close, you miss any games. Of course, you should want to bet the under on any player prop. You should look to that first because more things can go wrong than they can go right. And Mac Jones misses a game or two, he ain't hitting that over. He is not going to be, again, a 4,500-yard quarterback. That's just not how they want to play with him. And yeah, I think the under on Mac Jones just because the volume's not going to be there for him.
You know, it's funny, too, you bring that up, the Mac Jones game in Buffalo where he didn't throw the ball. Who's going to predict that? You have ridiculous wind, and the guy's not going to throw. He's going to have 17 yards passing or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah, that AFC East, you play bad weather games late in the year where Bill Belichick's like, hey, we want you to throw 12 times today, okay? Let's run the ball. I mean, yeah, he's not going to be a volume guy in any way, shape, or form.
Now, the last one you have, Matt Ryan going to Indianapolis, another different starting quarterback for the Colts. We'll see if this is the guy now after what happened with Carson Wentz last year. You're not a fan of Matt Ryan's over, are you?
No, I'm not, because you look at the Colts last year, they were fine. I mean, they should have made the playoffs if they didn't choke in Week 18. They threw for about 3,500 odd yards. You're asking Matt Ryan to go over 3,900. I don't know where the boost comes from. Aside from Pittman, who's very, very good, who's really catching the ball? I mean, Paris Campbell's probably going to get hurt at some point. People are expecting Mo Alley Cox to be something he hasn't been in all of his time in the league. So really, where does the passing volume come from with Matt Ryan? It's the same kind of thing. There's nothing against Matt Ryan as a player. I think he's going to be good for that offense. I think he's going to be more efficient than Carson Wentz was. But I just don't see the volume being there for him because this is a Colts team I really like in a division that they should win. And you're going to be salting away a lot of leads, handing the ball to Jonathan Taylor an awful lot. And I just don't see Matt Ryan being a high volume quarterback. So, and again, I mean, he is up there in age now. He's been durable, but what if he misses a game or two? You're definitely not hitting the over then. So again, it's the same kind of story with all three of these guys where where's the volume from with them? And especially with Indy, where I think they're going to have the lead a lot. They're going to be handing the ball off, protecting these leads. I just don't think Matt Ryan gets to, I think his over under, if I remember, it was about 3,900. I just can't see him being that high. And there's also just a chance Matt Ryan's washed up. I mean, he was bad last year. Now, I think that was because of the Falcons, right? Like their situation was terrible. But what if Matt Ryan's just cooked? What if he's at the end? He's at that age where it can happen really, really quickly. That's got to be baked into this bet. So yeah, Matt Ryan, my favorite under for these passing total props.
Frank Schwab, you can check him out at Yahoo Schwab on Twitter. Also check out his work at yahoo.com. Always a great job covering the NFL from a betting perspective. Frank, thank you very much. Best of luck this season. We'll talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, Kevin. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. Frank Schwab right there. Actually, we had one little mistake, and it was on my part, that the Matt Ryan number was around 3,900. We put 3,500. I typed that in wrong. That's my mistake. But Matt Ryan's number is still high. The Colts that's a very interesting team this year to see what Matt Ryan can do. If he's a guy like we saw with other players, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, we have to see with him too. Guys are with one team their whole career and then late go to a different team. We'll see how Matt Ryan fares going to the Colts coming up this season. We're going to get to Bruce Marshall coming up in just a second, talk some college football with him, look ahead to a few of the key games in week 2. But let's go to our second Major League Baseball play of the night, our total play. And it's down in Texas, the Rangers and the Astros. Houston won 1-0 last night. Let's stick with the under again tonight. It's at 7.5 between these two teams. Texas has been lousy of late, 9 consecutive losses. I don't forgive them for what happened last Thursday, up 8-3 on the Red Sox. They blew it and lost. But from a total perspective, 3 runs or less in 4 straight games for Texas. Framber Valdez has been outstanding. He's allowed 3 earned runs in 4 starts against the Rangers this year. Also, he's pitched very well of late as well for the Houston Astros. And I think that they keep their under streak alive at 7-2 the last 9. So let's go with the Astros Rangers under as our best total play tonight for Major League Baseball. All right, now time for some college football. And we bring in Bruce Marshall. And very excited to talk to Bruce. Bruce, you're looking good. You got your Dallas Stars hat on. So you're ready for hockey season. You're ready for every season. So you're always
I am
good to go. Bruce, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm good. Ready to cheer Joe Pavelski on again. Can't wait.
I'm telling you. I mean, you're more of a Russ Courtnall kind of guy, I think. But, hey, it's, new times for the Dallas Stars. Now let's go with our college football look for this week. Let's stay in the state of Texas, Bruce. Good segue there. Crimson Tide, Longhorns, Steve Sarkisian, Nick Saban. I feel like everyone's a former Saban assistant, and that's or facing Nick Saban in these situations. Alabama nearly a 3-touchdown favorite against Texas. You don't see the Longhorns ever in this spot, especially at home. But do you think the Crimson Tide cover this one against the Longhorns?
I don't, but caution. I thought Utah State was going to hang in there against the Tide last week. By the way, this was once upon a time, these two teams played in an Orange Bowl game in 1965. And you can find my story up there somewhere. It was the most important college football game of all time, I think, if not sporting event in America, because it was the first primetime game that was put on TV in a team sport ever. And that was a Joe Namath game against Texas and Tommy Novus. Anyway, that's a little bit of history there. You're right. Texas usually isn't a dog like this. And Sark had his problems last year. He was not the dog that Tom Herman was in the previous few years. And we know all that about last year. They went into the SEC and they got beat by Arkansas. And that's a measuring stick for what they have to do next year or in 2 years when they get into the SEC. I don't necessarily buy that. For one, a couple of years back, Texas beat a pretty good Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. So it's not always been that they've been beneath the SEC. That was a problem with Sarkisian last year. And I think there was some issues going on there. The transition after Herman to him, there's a lot of Herman guys left over, and it just never clicked last year for Sarkisian. And I think there's still some doubts about whether he's the right guy there. But Quinn Ewers comes in from Ohio State. They ran a little bit of a scaled down attack last week, but they have a lot of confidence from what we hear in him leading the attack and running the offense Sark wants. Now, obviously, Alabama looks all world again. We know about Saban's record against, and there's Bryce Young. You know about the record against his former assistants. I will point out he finally lost to two of them last year. He'd won 24 straight. Jimbo got him once, and then Kirby got him in the championship game. I would also caution about Bama, as all world as they looked last week. Don't forget last year, they went into Florida and barely won. They went into College Station and lost. They went into Auburn and should have lost. They don't just go out there and roll every week. And Saban, generally has started out pretty well in lid lifters, but this is a little bit different. And I'm just not sure they're going to go in there and name the score on Texas. This is a big spread, like you said, and I would rather take here. It's not my favorite game on the card, but you're getting up near 3 touchdowns. If Ewers can do something like they think, and Pete Kwiatkowski's defense is a little bit better than it was last year, they're not going to win this game, but I think they can keep it within 3 TDs.
Yeah, it's been a long time, Bruce. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Texas just being a double-digit underdog. I mean, forget at home. I don't even know if you could find that, but very interesting matchup early in the season, so we'll see how that one turns out. Now, the second game we'll look at, we'll stay in the SEC, Tennessee and Pitt. That's a rematch from last year. Very exciting game in Knoxville. Kenny Pickett, he lit up Tennessee. Pittsburgh won that game. Pickett's now obviously gone to the Steelers, but Tennessee favored, and Josh Heupel's turning things around for the Volunteers. But the Vols favored. Pitt snuck by West Virginia last week. All of a sudden, now they're a home dog. What do you think here about the Vols and the Panthers?
Well, if you're old like me, you remember some history between these schools. Johnny Majors left Pitt the year after he won the national championship at Pitt for his alma mater, Tennessee. In fact, he announced he was going to Tennessee before Pitt played in that Sugar Bowl game with Tony Dorsett and Matt Cavanaugh against Georgia. And Ray Goff at quarterback, by the way. And he stayed at Pitt, even though they knew he was going to Tennessee. Interestingly, after Tennessee pushed him out 16 years later, he ended up back at Pitt. So there's a little bit of a connection historically between these schools. That game last year, that was about the time we started to see Kenny Pickett was something special. He didn't post super huge numbers in that game, but he looked very good. He's very much in charge, just beneath 300 yards passing, a couple TDs. More importantly, you mentioned Heupel. Early last season, that was September 11 last year, so it was game 2 for the Vols. It was before he decided on going with Hendon Hooker as his quarterback. He was still alternating Hooker with Joe Milton at that point a year ago, so the spread wasn't quite humming the way it would come October when Hooker came in the lineup, and there he is, and he started to post some very big numbers for Heupel. So it was a different Tennessee, and now they are humming. They are humming as much as Heupel's UCF's teams did. You go back their last 6 games beginning about midway last year and into last week against Ball State. They've scored 45 or more in 5 of those games. One game went into overtime in the bowl against Purdue. But you can see the offense is running hyperspeed now, which it really wasn't yet at this point last year. Now, I don't think Keaton Slovis is a bad replacement for Pickett. Remember, at this time last year, he was regarded as more of a Heisman candidate at SC. than Pickett was. However, I don't know that he can be quite as efficient. And Tennessee is really got this tempo going right now. I know West Virginia scored some last week. They play at a faster tempo than West Virginia. Narduzzi's defense is going to have its hands full with Tennessee here. And I sort of like the SEC angle in this game here. I know LSU didn't do it Sunday night, but that's the only one that didn't win last week. I'm going to take the SEC here. I'm going to take Tennessee to get some revenge. My score forecast I put on it was 42-31, I think. So it might get over that total too. But I'll lay the points. I'm going to bullish on Tennessee here. I'm bullish on Heupel, and I love Hooker, and I think they're going to outgun the Panthers on Saturday.
So, Bruce, you have Saturday afternoon the Battle of the Hawkeye State. Iowa and Iowa State, always interesting when they get together. And I'm just going to assume this. I don't have it in front of me, Bruce, but I'm going to assume it, that the Iowa Hawkeyes are the first team in college football history to win a game with play in two games where they've had two safeties on their side and two safeties on the other side. Because the game in 2004 against Penn State, the 6-4 game, Penn State had two safeties. Iowa had two safeties this past week in a 7-3 win. I can't think many of other schools have done that by having two safeties for and against them ever.
No, and getting to 7 points without scoring a touchdown is a neat trick. There's only one way to do it: field goal into safeties. And that 4 you mentioned at Penn State, I wrote something about this last year. There's only 3 games I remember teams scoring 4. Oregon, Fresno, 1982. And Miami and the Florida Gators in 87, and Iowa, Penn State in 04. 4-4-4 in those games. So it doesn't happen much. And last week, 7 points and 2 safeties to help them get there. It was ugly. That's the way Kirk Ferentz does it. To say they were just keeping things under wraps, that became desperate for them last week. I don't think that's quite fair in front of Iowa State. But for the Cyhawk in recent years, this has been a series Iowa has dominated. Matt Campbell has not gotten over the hump yet against Iowa State. He's beaten everybody else in the Big 12, including Oklahoma a couple times. He hasn't beaten Iowa yet. And I'm not sure Iowa State's ready to trade points. They weren't with Brock Purdy and Breece Hall in recent years. Decker's their new quarterback. I'm not sure he's where Purdy was. And this is the way Ferentz does it. It's slow and steady as she goes. They win games with defense and trying not to make mistakes offensively. It's not a very pretty combination there, but it is very effective. And Iowa State has had trouble stepping up here and winning these games against Iowa. So I think maybe under the total might be something you want to look at, though the total's not all that high. But I'd stick with the series trends here in Ferentz to do it again. He's got Iowa State's number. There's something psychological about this, and the Cyclones just never play well against Iowa, and that's been kind of rare for a Matt Campbell ISU team, but that's been what's happened. So I'm going to lean to Iowa a little bit. Not my favorite game on the card, but I think ugly game, but that's the way Kirk Ferentz likes it.
Bruce, you mentioned Kevin Slotis earlier and his former team, USC. Now they're taking on Stanford, and that was the game last year. Stanford upset USC, and then Clay Helton got fired, and all of a sudden USC, they're looking around for a coach. They need to make a big home run hire. They did with Lincoln Riley. USC had a couple pick sixes this past week. They win big. So now revenge spot against Stanford. David Shaw is always, you never know if you can get that upset again with Stanford. But what do you think now? First Pac-12 game for USC. We know that the time is running out for their Pac-12 games, but this USC-Stanford matchup at Palo Alto.
Yeah, 3 pick sixes SC got last week. I didn't know that Rice's quarterback spent the offseason studying films of Jameis Winston with the Bucks in 2019. That's what happened. That game wasn't that much one-sided. Rice is moving the ball pretty well against SC. And all this hype for the Trojans. Listen, LA is going nuts again. You're going to have the Kardashian girls hanging around SC. Caleb Williams thinks he's Mookie Betts. He'd love to have TMZ follow him around. I'm not buying yet. And this is a pure finesse team. They didn't line up and knock down Rice much at all this week. Everything was finesse and speed. They were faster than Rice. So they're probably better than they were last year. And Riley deserves some of the benefit of the doubt. But Stanford has had given SC a lot of trouble. Now, Stanford last year, that you look back, how did they do that? They weren't that physical last year, and that's the problem certainly last year with Stanford. They weren't running the ball or stopping the run like they used to in their heyday within the last decade, but they ran fairly well against SC. And Tanner McKee, this is an NFL quarterback, I think, and they did run last. It was only Colgate, but 6 yards per carry for Stanford against anybody these days is something to hang your hat on. They think they can run a little bit better. They're going to have to get better on defense. Lance Anderson, the coordinator, has been around. He didn't get dumb overnight. He switched the alignment. They're going more 4-3 this year. They've got more quicks on the outside. They're going to get in Caleb Williams' face a little bit more than Rice did last week, maybe a lot more. Shaw has won and covered 6 of the last 8 against SC. I know Stanford hasn't covered a game since last October. I think it's 8 straight they haven't covered now, but don't worry about that last week. I throw last season out. They also had injuries down the stretch. You mentioned the key thing. They hate SC up there. They're not sure when they're going to get them on the farm again. In 2 years, SC is going to be off to the Big Ten. So a fanatical effort from Stanford. I think they hang in there. I need to see a lot more in this SC defense to think they're upgraded, and that's going to be the difference if SC is going to be really a serious factor this year. I'm not sold on that yet. I'm taking Stanford plus the points. David Shaw, his history against SC, that they can ugly this thing up enough and slow down that SC offense.
Bruce, the final game we'll look at, the Saturday night, I don't call it a Chase special, but a future Big 12 matchup, Baylor and BYU, and this is just very intriguing. And with all these other games, I mean, Alabama, Texas, and even the USC game, I feel like this one is kind of under the radar a little bit with 2 very good teams. Baylor won the Big 12 last year. BYU still very quality. They have a very tough schedule being an independent. They don't mess around. What do you think about this game with the Cougars laying a short number here against Baylor, late night game Saturday?
I think BYU is real quality again. I mean, they just didn't have any trouble with South Florida. And by the way, they went to Tampa last week. That quarterback for South Florida, Jerry Bohannon, was the guy at Baylor last year who beat BYU when they come in there in mid-October. Now, BYU had a little dip last year, right around there. Remember, they started out 5-0, lost that game against Boise, and then they were kind of flat the next week at Baylor and got beat. Baylor was good last year, though. We'll see. Now they've got to go out on the road. This is a tough place to play up at Provo. Jalen Hall put up some good numbers again last week. BYU, very difficult to beat there. Yes, it's a preview of coming attractions in the Big 12. And Miranda, really, it was a nice turnaround last year. I'll throw out the COVID 2020. Everything kind of went wrong that season when Baylor got in the field, a lot of COVID problems and things like that. Turned it around last year, and Miranda was a pretty good underdog last year as well. They were good last year. It's a tough spot. I like the revenge spot here for BYU. They're at home early in the season. They're firing on all cylinders. Baylor did last week too. They put up a lot of points as well, but I'm going to go with the revenge angle here. BYU, tough place to play. The offense is humming, and I think they get their revenge from last year.
Bruce, before we let you go, what were 1 or 2 betting storylines from week 1 that stuck out to you?
Actually, the Pac-12, and not what people think. I think it was generally a positive weekend for the Pac-12. And Oregon. Okay, we know they got destroyed at the Georgia, and Utah lost that very close one at Florida. Utah might still be a top 10 team. Watch these teams. Might be much improved. Arizona really jumped off the page at me. They've got a new quarterback. Jaden DeLora came in from Washington State. Cowing, the wide receiver from UTEP, dynamite combination. They torched San Diego State. And it was a big game for the Aztecs opening up their new stadium. It wasn't close. Arizona looks like it might be a lot better than last year. Washington, there's no reason Washington should have been as bad as it was last year. Totally on Jimmy Lake being unqualified to be a head coach. Sort of like Florida down in the SEC. There's no reason the Gators should have been as bad as they were last year. Same thing with Washington. They were much better than they showed. Penix, the transfer quarterback, the lefty in from Indiana, looked good against Kent State. I like Kalen DeBoer's hire a lot. They handled a big spread against Kent State. Watch Washington. And finally, Oregon State. They got a game against Fresno this week on the road where they had a little bit more trouble last year, but they took care of Boise with no problem last week, none whatsoever. And they run the football, which a lot of teams don't these days, and Nolan, the quarterback, is back from last year. So I generally think the Pac-12 showed well last week, and don't be fooled just by Oregon getting blown out by Georgia. Georgia's in a different class, as we know. The rest of Pac-12 looks like it's stronger. And, of course, SC, too, a little better than it was last year, maybe a lot better. So keep your eye on the Pac-12.
All right, Bruce, you're going to have tech trends again for us this season for college football and NFL?
Coming up in about a half hour.
All right, perfect. So check it out. Bruce Marshall all over every college football game with tech trends as well as the NFL week 1. You can check him out weekly at Vegas Insider as well. Bruce, thanks so much for the time. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, Kevin.
All right, that is Bruce Marshall. Always a wealth of knowledge. Always enjoy talking to him. And a lot of good opinions from Bruce. I didn't even talk NFL with him. I just, on college. I mean, NFL, he's got a lot of stuff too. All right. We're going to get to our NFL trend of the day coming up in just a second. But first, let's tell you about Bet365. And Vegas Insider and Bet365, they have teamed up. And there's a great deal now for new users. And if you come on to Bet365, listen to this deal. Bet365 Sportsbook is offering an exclusive bonus. Customers can bet $1 and get $200 in free bets. Users must use the code NJVIP at signup and be located in a legal betting state where Bet365 is licensed. This is for new users only, and full terms and conditions apply. Again, that is Bet365. All right, now it's time for our NFL trend of the day. And we'll give you these trends every day towards the end of the show, just to give you something to look forward to. Remember, trends are your friends until they're not. So we're going to start with this one. The Indianapolis Colts, who travel to Houston this week to take on the Texans. The Indianapolis Colts, they are, get the drum roll ready, 1-11 their last 12 week 1 games. Is that even possible? All these teams, all these garbage teams in the NFL, and yet the Indianapolis Colts, who are predicted to win the AFC South, they have won once in the last 12 years on opening day. All right. Matt Ryan is the 6th different starting quarterback in an opener for the Colts. Let's go back through the years, like Kenny Rogers. So Matt Ryan, 2022. Carson Wentz, 2021, lost to Seattle. 2020, Phillip Rivers lost at Jacksonville. Remember that famous game? Week 1, 7-point favorites. 2019, Jacoby Brissett lost to the Chargers in overtime. 2018, Andrew Luck lost at home to Cincinnati. 2017, Scott Tolzien, the Scott Tolzien era with the Colts. They got blown out by the Rams. Then 16, it was Luck, lost to Detroit. 15, Luck, lost to Buffalo. 14, Luck, lost to Denver on a Sunday night. 13, Luck beat the then Oakland Raiders. They were laying 11, didn't cover. 12, Luck's rookie year, lost at Chicago. 11, Kerry Collins lost at Houston. 2010, Peyton Manning lost at Houston. One singular time they have covered in this span. It was at Denver that Sunday night. They were getting 8, lost by 7. The last time the Indianapolis Colts won and covered as a favorite in week 1, 2007. It's been a while. It's been a very long time. And when you go through all these different starting quarterbacks every year, I mean, Andrew Luck, we know, was supposed to be the guy forever for the Colts, then he retired. But they've gone through Wentz, Rivers, Brissett. None of them have won in the openers. And now granted, they've only been a favorite once in this span. That was against Jacksonville in 2020. They were a dog against Seattle, dog against the Chargers, dog against the Bengals, home dog. But now they're laying 7.5, 8 against Houston. And they did beat Houston twice last year. Double revenge spot for the Texans. Davis Mills played all right towards the end of last year. Maybe the Colts could be a fade week 1 against the Houston Texans. So keep an eye on that. That's our NFL trend of the day for tonight, for this Tuesday night. So check that out. Every night we'll have our NFL trend of the day. We'll have a fresh one tomorrow. Speaking of trends, Vince Akins, he will join us tomorrow. He joined us on the Daily Insider, if you remember last year, our midday show. And Vince Akins has a bunch of trends that the trend machine goes overtime. And he's going to have some trends for NFL week 1. We'll have that tomorrow night on the show. So looking forward to that as we get set for Bills Rams Thursday in LA. So very excited about that. My thanks to Frank Schwab from Yahoo Sports at Yahoo Schwab on Twitter. Also Bruce Marshall. You can check out his tech trends at Vegas Insider for college football and the NFL. Spencer Ray, great job running the show from behind the scenes. Good to be back. We'll be back with you tomorrow at 6 o'clock Eastern for Down to the Wire. Also, 11 a.m. tomorrow, Chasing That Paper with Joe Osborne. So find that on our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider TV and also at VegasInsider.com as well. I was about to say my name, but I got caught there for a second, so I need a second. Now let's do it. I'm Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching, and as always, best of luck with your bets.